Overpaying for anything sucks, especially socks, so why pay $45 for a single pair of grip socks when you can spend less than half? Pure Grip Socks Pro feature our best materials for optimal fit, moisture wicking, and performance at a fair price, just $16.99 a pair at puregripsocks.com.
In 2017, Puma launched a super unique pair of football boots in the Puma Future, which introduced their net fit technology, effectively netting across the majority of the upper that allowed you to customize the lacing system, changing up the fit, the comfort, as well as the overall lockdown in a way that actually worked. Unfortunately, over the years, a lot of what made those early Puma Future models special has more or less gone away. Net fit is no more, and we're now in early 2024 with Puma hopefully trying to recapture some of that early Puma Future magic. Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to the brand new Puma Future 7 Ultimate FTR, the replacement for the current Future Ultimate, which of course does recycle the same sole plate and stud pattern, however, does kind of revamp almost everything regarding the upper in that it's still a knitted material. However, that's been changed up. The power print texturing on the surface has been moved around quite significantly. The lacing system is quite a bit different, and the utilization of power tape instead of a zigzag across the side that looked weird and did absolutely nothing is now in the shape of a Y running across the top of the foot. With this particular pair being the limited edition teaser pack colorway, bearing a retail price of $240, up 20 bucks from last year's Puma Future, although I do have reason to believe that the regular colorways of this boot, releasing likely very soon, will retail for the same $220. And I already know what you're thinking. It's the same boot over again, just with some new graphics. And to some extent that is true. On paper, I don't think the Future 7 is that different from the previous generation. However, the modifications that they have made do make for a significantly, or I should say noticeably different experience, in some ways a lot better and in some ways a little bit worse. Which is why in today's video we're going to go over all the details of the Future 7 Ultimate FTR, talk about the good, the bad, and whether or not you should be considering these as your next pair of football boots. So if you're interested in learning more, including how they fit and feel on feet, please stick around. And if you are interested in a pair for yourself, you can pick them up below the normal retail price by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes via the first link down below. And as always, guys, if you enjoy these brutally honest reviews on the channel, don't forget to drop a like on the video and make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you haven't already, so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots of 2024. To get right to the point, there are basically 5 main changes coming from the previous Future Ultimate to the new Future 7. The first of which is the collar that has been shortened slightly, making this a little bit more of a traditional low-cut design in terms of how it wears on feet. Technically, the mesh-based synthetic itself has been changed up a little bit, although I would argue that it feels largely the same. The power print texture on the surface, however, has been ramped up quite significantly, where to the touch, at least when you run your finger along it, there is significantly more grit and roughness to the surface of this upper. The lacing system has been changed up quite drastically and in general is very unique in terms of really just having 3 main anchoring points running across the top of the foot. And then of course you have that double layer power tape, which has been moved from the zigzag along either side into this Y shape, cutting directly across the middle of this elasticated knit material, really restricting its ability to stretch. However, here's the thing. Out of those 5 main changes, I think only 2 of them impact the overall experience, and that is the lacing system along with the power tape. The mesh-based upper is thin, flexible, really sock-like, has a nice padding to the inside liner itself. So if you're looking for something that really has that kind of classic sock-like feel that's become so popular in the world of football boots, I think the feel of this upper on the ball is as good as anything, and it is extremely comfortable on feet, as has been the case with the Puma Future for the last several generations. So no real complaints there, despite the changes definitely being on the minimal side. The power print texturing is something that they're really making a big deal out of. You can see it's made up of these little rectangular shapes, and if you look even more closely, there's even smaller rectangles within the different colors of the upper that are a little bit difficult to see. And again, when you run your finger along this boot, it has that little bit of rough grittiness to it that I can almost relate to something like a Phantom GT from Nike. However, it's nowhere near as significant, and in terms of the additional grip that it provides on the ball, as I've talked about with so many football boots that kind of have this micro texturing on the surface, there's just not a lot of grip to be had. The grip will vary more so depending on the ball itself rather than wearing these particular boots. So if you're looking for that sticky grip sensation, you're not getting it here from the Future, which does make these dramatically different from other quote-unquote control boots on the market in the Nike Phantom GX, or of course the Adidas Predator 30. It's not until you get to the area across the top of the foot where you start to get to some of the more distinctive elements in terms of fit and feel that the Future 7 Ultimate has on offer, that are not only different from the previous generation Future, but also pretty unique compared to other football boots currently available. Of course, the central portion of the upper is a one-piece construction. You can see it's all fused pretty seamlessly with the rest of the mesh-based synthetic material. However, this part is an elasticated knit, as we see from so many brands. However, instead of allowing that to kind of stretch freely like every other variation of the Puma Future, you now have this Y-shaped power print that's actually 2 layers of material and effectively a really thin but remarkably strong type of plastic that we do see utilized on other Puma models. However, every utilization we've seen of power tape thus far has been in areas where it just has no impact on the fit or feel of the football boot. This time around though, they put it in the stretchy part of the upper, and it's very clear that this restricts the stretch of the upper across the top of the foot. Whether or not that's a good thing, however, is something that you kind of have to decide for yourself once you get these on feet. I wouldn't say that it's particularly uncomfortable. I didn't have any issues with blisters, but I will say, being somebody with fairly low arches and in general a fairly flat foot, I found there to be a little bit more pressure specifically in this area where all 3 sides kind of meet in this Y than I personally would have liked to have had. Does it improve the overall lockdown? Definitely. It feels very secure through this area of the foot compared to a lot of football boots out there. However, I just think I would have found the experience to be a little bit more comfortable had this had the ability to stretch like normal one-piece knitted upper football boots typically do. With the added structure from the power tape being the reason for what is a fairly minimalist style of lacing setup, which does remind me a lot of how I used to lace up the Puma Future when it had the net fit system. I liked the idea of having less anchor points within the upper, just giving it a nice flexible feel, but still giving you the lockdown that you want from a pair of football boots in general for the sake of lockdown comfort and overall performance. So despite having less anchor points in general, your feet still feel very, very secure, but by far the tightest point in the upper, at least for me, is right here across the top of the foot, which again is not necessarily a bad feel. It's just something that I'm particularly not used to and in general wasn't a huge fan of, but you might have a completely different opinion based on personal preference. As far as wearing these as laceless boots, something that Puma has kind of on and off marketed with the Future series over the years, it doesn't seem to be a part of the marketing material with the Future 7. So as far as I'm aware, their intention is that you wear this football boot with the laces. However, when you're talking about the laceless experience, because of this added structure from this power tape material, there is a little bit more lockdown through the midfoot than what past laceless Future models would have had, although given the fact that over the last couple years at least, they have released dedicated laceless variations of the Puma Future, I think if you're interested in the 7, I would recommend wearing them with the laces. Moving to the rear, as mentioned earlier, the collar has been shortened along the sides ever so slightly, but in general it just feels like a low-cut boot with a little bit of an extension across the front as well as the back. You have an internal plastic heel counter just like the past Future, and in general the heel liner seems to be about the same. Really soft microfiber material, a decent amount of padding, great overall shaping, and in general the comfort and lockdown through the heel I think is top notch. The Puma Future has been one of the more comfortable options on the market in terms of out-of-the-box comfort for the last several years, and I still think that is more or less the case here with the latest variation. And then moving on to the insole, you'll notice that the nano grip texturing on the surface has been changed out. It used to have a little bit of that kind of silicone texture to it. Now it's just a soft kind of microfiber, but the foam itself has not changed. Solid black foam, yellow perforated inserts running across the entire bottom. I would say it's a bit of a downgrade, but in general, especially for most people, not something that you're going to notice. Which brings us to the base, again, a carryover feature from the last several generations of Puma Future, and in general, still a really solid sole plate. It's made entirely out of plastic. You can see you kind of have a little bit of a split sole design, exposing some of that upper on the bottom of the foot, but there is still a plastic plate underneath all of this. This is effectively just the stud plate. In general, it has a more flexible feel than a lot of football boots out there, so if you're looking for that kind of snapback sensation, you're not necessarily getting it from the Future 7 Ultimate. And as far as the stud pattern is concerned, it's bladed studs pretty much all the way through, on the aggressive side for sure, and again, kind of on par with what you're going to find from most top-end models. I know a lot of people would have liked to have seen a change on this latest Future, but in terms of what is on offer here, this is still top-notch in terms of feel as well as performance. And then there's the weight, where the trend with the Puma Future series is that it's gained a little bit of weight with almost every new generation. How does it compare to the Future Ultimate it replaces, however? That's what we're about to find out, both in the same size 9.5 US. We'll start off with the old pair. They weigh in at 8.1 ounces, the equivalent of 230 grams. So again, not heavy, but definitely not on the super light end of things as far as top end boots go. And then here is the Future 7 Ultimate, and you can see that they weigh in at 8 ounces, the equivalent of 226 grams. So technically, the Future 7 is 4 grams lighter than the old model, which effectively means you're not going to notice a difference in weight. On feet, there are two main differences that I really noticed coming from the previous generation Future Ultimate. The first of which has to do with the construction of the upper, kind of changing the way that the upper itself falls on your foot. I find that the forefoot seems to be a little bit wider and a little bit more rounded, and a lot of the ugly creasing you got kind of on the inside of the forefoot area of the previous model seems to be gone on this new variation. It just, in general, wraps your foot a little bit cleaner with less folding and creasing of the material, which I think is a definite improvement. The power tape across the top of the foot, however, is by far the most noticeable difference and something that's going to be pretty distinctive to the Future 7 in general, just compared to any other football boot. And that has to do with the tension that you have across the top of the foot. Basically, the upper part of the Y, this part you really don't feel at all, but there's definitely a squeezing sensation in that part of the foot where the upper wants to expand, but that power tape is restricting it. And it's not restricting it so much so that I think it's uncomfortable, but like I mentioned earlier in the video, I'm fairly flat-footed, so I don't have a high volume midfoot at all. If you had a really high arch and a high volume midfoot, I could definitely see why this might be something that is potentially a little bit uncomfortable for you. And like I said earlier, would I prefer the feel of this football boot without that pressure across the top of the foot? Probably, but I don't think it's detrimental to the overall comfort. At the very least, like I said, it does make these feel distinctive in a way that could be perceived as positive. So again, personal preference is going to play a huge role here. And as far as how this power tape is impacting the performance of the boot, is there an argument to be made that you're going to have better lockdown because it's a little bit more secure across the top of the foot? Possibly, but I think it's a really difficult thing to measure. And for anyone to say that this is going to make the boot perform better, that's a bit of a stretch for me. But again, to each their own as far as opinions go. When it comes to overall comfort and width, there's plenty of width to this football boot. Again, the only thing to take note of is the volume through the midfoot because of that power tape design. But in general, super comfortable out of the box. One of the more comfortable boots that you can buy, in my opinion. And in terms of width, suitable for most foot types as long as you don't have ridiculously wide feet. And as far as sizing is concerned, it's still pretty much the same as the last couple generations where they're a smidge long, maybe not even a quarter size. So I'm wearing them in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. I personally couldn't afford to go down half a size, and I think for most people, if you're already wearing your boots pretty snug, true to size is going to be the best option for you. Whereas if you do have a little bit of extra space in your boots as of right now, and you're looking into the Puma Future, going down half a size might not be a bad idea. So in conclusion, while I don't think this is the change or improvement that a lot of longtime fans of the Future series were necessarily hoping for, I do think it is a step forward for the line. The feel of the upper is still largely the same and kind of a signature of the Future series in terms of just being really sock-like and comfortable, both on the ball as well as on your feet. I think the new shaping to the upper, or at least how it wraps your foot, because of the design changes, does feel a lot better. They're still super comfortable. The lockdown from the lacing system is great, and I like the fact that the power tape is finally a noticeable feature, maybe not in such a way that I think everybody is going to necessarily enjoy, but if you do like that sensation of the boots feeling like they're hugging your feet, this does that in a way that you really won't get from any other football boot right now. Assuming that the normal colorways are going to revert back to that $220 price tag, the Future 7 now becomes $40 to $80 less expensive than the mainstream kind of popular alternatives from Nike or Adidas. And considering how much less they cost, they're still a football boot that hold their own in terms of fit, comfort, and overall performance. They are as good as anything in that regard, and I think for the first time in a couple of years now, they finally have something about them that feel distinctively Puma Future.